Shabbat shalom, everybody. So, true confession, I don't like serious stuff. I like it. I get uncomfortable. I sweat. I feel awkward and I don't know what to do with my hands and my shoulders come up to my ears. It's not a good look. I'm glad I didn't meet my wife when I was looking like this. And I actually, fun fact, in high school, I was not voted most academic. I wasn't voted most athletic, and I wasn't voted most likely to succeed. I was voted class clown, which is basically like being voted least likely to succeed. And I had that trajectory for the rest of my life. But in most situations and circumstances, I'm always kind of looking for the angle, like, okay, this is getting kind of serious. I feel like I need to lighten the mood, need to crack a joke, need to like take this a different direction. And as I've gotten older and hopefully by the sanctification of the Holy Spirit, learn to mature. But even as a pastor early on, I've been a pastor functionally since I was early 20s. And I remember the first couple times I had to do funerals or be at funerals, I was so uncomfortable because as people would lament and mourn and grieve, I was like, I don't know what to do with any of that. I don't know. I feel like I need to make a joke, and then people were like, don't. Like, are you sure? Sure. Like, I wouldn't even finish my sentence. Like, are you sure? Like, we're sure. And so I would always be a little bit uncomfortable. And I've even later in life, as I've worked through some of this with mentors of mine and a counselor, he actually pointed out that I struggle with what's called incongruence sometimes. So sometimes when I'm really upset, or even when I cry, I will laugh, which my wife says is terrifying. So I'm like, she's like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And I'm like, I don't know how to just cry. I have to laugh. And so I don't like serious things. And real talk, I don't love lament. I usually feel guilty for grieving. And I really try to avoid being serious. But here's the thing. It's important all the same. And it's healthy all the same. And tonight, this Shabbat, I actually want to talk to you guys about lament. The fun-filled, jovial topic of lament. And what inspired this, just to be honest, and I'll say this again later, I actually had about 2 or 3 different ideas for a sermon. And I'd actually had some stuff that I already had done a lot of research on or I had preached before. And I felt like the Lord was leading me to preach on lament. And a couple weeks ago, I attended Rabbi E's funeral. And I think that's kind of what backgrounded a lot of this. And as I heard about this legend of a rabbi and his incredible life, there was this really, really beautiful balance of lament and mourning, but also in hope that that is truly not eternally the end for Rabbi E. And I heard this effusive joy expressed at the incredible life that he lived and legacy that he left. And so I think that really painted the picture and kind of backgrounded it for me of why I thought, okay, let's talk about lament tonight, the fun-filled world and jovial nature of lament. But I also know, working in pastoral ministry, and Rabbi Kevin would say this in rabbinic ministry, you know when people come to a service, they're coming in with all kinds of baggage, all kinds of hurts, all kinds of wounds. The stuff that's right at the front of your brain, the stuff that's deep at the back recesses of your brain, the stuff you're keenly aware of, you're wiping your tears before you get out of the car, and the stuff that kind of sneaks up on you subtly and surreptitiously. And so we all come in with something, if we're being honest. I heard a rabbi one time tell a joke talking about what people are carrying around. And he said, if you ask a congregant, hey, how you doing in one word? They'll say, good. But if you dig just a little bit deeper and you ask, hey, how you doing? In 2 words, they'll go, not good. And I thought that was the truest thing I've ever heard. And so tonight, here's kind of the point I want to make to you. Lament is part of life and formative for our faith. Lament is part of life and formative for our faith. And we're going to explore tonight, lament, but like waiting and hoping and laments. Waiting and hoping and laments. And what we want to endeavor to do is just like I saw at Rabbi E's funeral, we want to hold hope and despair equally. Joy and lament in balance. And there is a health to that. And ultimately what I want to do is by the end of this Erev Shabbat, speak some encouragement and some hope to you, my mishpacha, here at Congregation Beth Hallel. So, you guys ready to get into it? All right, look at your neighbor and say, let's talk about lament. Let's talk about lament. We're going to be in a scroll of the Tanakh called Eyka. We'll talk about that in a minute, but actually you will know it as Lamentations. So you can turn to Lamentations. And we're going to talk about the whole thing. We're going to ambitiously take on the whole thing. And let me give you a little background. Let's talk about the name. It's called Lamentations. And then in the Greek canon of New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, it's called Lamentations based on derivative of the Greek name. And it's simply a collection. We'll talk about the Hebrew name. It's a collection of laments. And laments are simply being honest with the Lord, pouring out your heart, asking hard questions, venting and just mourning, sitting in pain and emotion and just letting that be okay and letting that be expressed. There's something cathartic and healthy about lamenting. And in fact, as we study Lamentations, most historians and biblical scholars think that this is a collection of corporate laments that the people of Israel probably started forming in exile. They started forming these laments in exile. And so we're going to talk about these laments. And these laments, they're visceral, and they're honest, and they're raw. And they're specific to the context of exile, but they're also universal given our experience today. And let me tell you, so I told you it's called Lamentations. That's the English based on the Greek. Let me give you the Hebrew name of this text, and it gives you a little bit of a different lens through which to read it. The Hebrew name for this is Eyka. Eyka. You guys try that on. Eyka. And Eyka, if I were to write it, it would be with an exclamation point and a question mark, or a question mark and an exclamation point. It's and the way it translates is how. Like, what? How? And the visual I like to use is my wife has a nicer car than I do. And that's on purpose. I don't deserve a nice car. Wouldn't even know what to do with it besides run it into the ground. And if my wife let me borrow her car and I took it for a stroll along the neighborhood and I pulled into the driveway and the grill was bent and the bumper was hanging off like a kid's loose tooth and there were scratches all along the side and one of the doors was missing like I'm in a Jeep Wrangler on the highway and the tire was flat and kicked out and the muffler was dragging and causing sparks and there was coffee stains all over the place, she would look at me and she would ask, how? How did this happen? It looks like it took effort for you to do this. This looks calculated. That is the kind of question and fervor and incredulity behind Eyka, this Hebrew word Eyka. It's an exclamation, but it's also an emphasis on, oh, how. You'll see that translated a lot, like, oh, how. Oi, how did this happen? And the author, who most assume is Jeremiah or Baruch, is asking this question, how? How did this happen? And what is the this? The this is exile in the Tanakh. The children of Israel are in Haaretz, and they're doing their thing. And as the prophets warned them to be obedient to Torah and to follow the Lord time and time again, they disobey. And the prophets, like Jeremiah, said, "You're going to go into exile if we don't faithfully follow." And then they're like, "Be quiet." And he's like, "I'm just telling you." And like, "Be quiet." And he's like, "I'm going to say what I said." And like, "Be quiet." And then, as you all know, in 586, the Babylonian Empire forcefully conquers, destroys the city of Jerusalem, and hauls the people of Israel off into exile in Babylon. And after 500 years in Haaretz, they're plucked forcefully and violently, and through tears and with ash and soot covering their face, they have to look back on Jerusalem and see their city burning and look ahead to this evil empire, probably spires of towers reaching up to the sky, and know that they're going into the belly of the beast. And scholars and historians believe that Eyka, or Lamentations, picks up with the children of Israel by the river in Babylon just weeping. Just weeping. Almost as if the tears running down their cheek are filling up the river higher and higher. And so that's the context. But here's something you need to know. Here's what's one of the beautifully unique things about Eyka, about Lamentations. It provides us a picture into the exile. And in fact, in the Tanakh, in the Ketuvim, Lamentations, or Eyka, is followed by Esther and then Daniel. And those three texts will give us a window into exile. If we did not have those three scrolls of the Tanakh, we would not have that same window into exile. We wouldn't exactly know what happened in exile or how they were feeling or what their affect was in exile. And so we're privileged this view in what we would call the exilic books. So we've talked about the name, we've talked about some context. Now let's talk about kind of some stylistic elements of Eyka and Lamentations. And let me talk to you, I'm a huge art nerd. Some of my friends love it. Some of them are like, "Oh, yeah, here goes Matt on his art tangent again, blah, 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 blah." But I love art. I love talking about art. I love talking about culture. And I get so excited to teach about Eyka, even when you're like, "Really? It's all about lament?" Yeah, I'm gonna just tell you right now. Eyka is a brilliant, a crushingly beautiful, creative work. Yes, when we read the word, when we read the Tanakh, it is inspired, it is historically true, it is valid, we base our life on it. But what sometimes bums me out is people also don't realize the beauty of the text. It is a work of art, of literary genius. And so what holds Eyka, or Lamentations, together is Hebrew poetry. And I tell people all the time when I teach some classes at my church that a lot of times we want a historical textbook. And I'm like, that's not how they did history in the Tanakh all the time. They actually put a lot of stock into poetry because poetry has meter and rhythm and meter. I combine the two words, rhythm and meter. Meter, rhythm, rhyme, and wordplay. And all those things make it more memorizable, like a song. And so Eyka, or Lamentations, are just this collection of corporate laments that are poems. And Hebrew poetry is built off of parallelism, just so you know, just for fun. I could say, "I stood and taught." And then the next line I would say, "I was up there and preached." I said the same thing, but in two different ways. This is what Hebrew poetry is predicated on. And again, it has meter to it, it has rhythm to it, has rhyme to it, and it has wordplay. But within Hebrew poetry, there's this genius poetic device called acrostic. And a lot of times we get this confused with acronym, but so if I said ABC, it's like America's Broadcast Company, right? That's like an acronym. An acrostic in Hebrew poetry works like this. It's mind-blowing and befuddling. Basically, in a section of text, it will go through the Aleph Tav, the Hebrew alphabet. And the first letter of the first word of every line is a letter of the Hebrew alphabet, but it goes in order. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, boom, 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 boom. It's so specific. And I'm not gonna lie, I've tried to do it. It's hard to do and do it well with that same meter and rhythm and rhyme and wordplay that and still packed in with biblical and theological truth and still compelling and beautiful. It's hard to do, but that is what acrostic is. And so as you're reading an acrostic, you'll go, okay. There's Aleph, oh, the beginning of the next verse, then the beginning of the next verse, Gimel, Dalet. That's how it works. And Lamentations is brilliant poetry, but it's specifically written as acrostic. And that is pertinent to the aesthetic of the text because many scholars surmise, like, oh, why is this so intricate? Why is this so creatively complex? Well, a lot of times when you're experiencing disorder in dissonance, like in exile or like in a season of lament and mourning, a highly structured poem like this creates some order from that chaos. In pastoral ministry, a lot of times when I meet someone that's very type A, super organized, their house looks like it's showing at all times, right? Like, why isn't there like a real estate sign in the lawn? And they're like, oh, this is just how our house looks, right? It smells like lemon all the time, right? This place is clean. You can literally get off the floors. Normally, those people grew up in some kind, not always, but I've found a lot of times, those people grew up in disorder or chaos. And so they're like, this helps me feel like some semblance of control. And so some scholars and historians believe that Eyka is structured in this creative complexity of poetry and acrostic to create order from disorder. But also this brilliantly beautiful creative work is in essence creating beauty out of tragedy. Man, we are at our lowest points. Literally, our tears are filling the river. But we're going to make some art out of this. We're going to make something beautiful because we believe ultimately the Lord's going to make something beautiful out of this. And we want to reflect that in this acrostic. And what you see in Eyka and Lamentations, as we see these acrostics, Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, and last letter, Tav, we see literally, last thing, the ABCs, if you will, of lament. Eyka Lamentations will teach us literally the ABCs of lament. From top to bottom, this is what lament looks like. We're going to capture the whole journey with this. So now we've talked about the style, let's talk about the structure, and then we're going to talk about the poems. So the structure of this, I'll come down here so I can kind of reference it on the screen. The structure of Eyka Lamentations is built around 5 poems written in acrostic, except there's a catch to one of them, but we'll get to that. And just look at this like giant building, right? And I want to give you like an analogy. My wife and I were blessed and privileged to take a trip to Europe a couple years ago. And it was right before COVID, and we got to go to Prague, Vienna, and then Budapest. And in Prague, there's this really cool experience of going up to the very top of the city. It's this windy, circuitous road. You get to the top of the city. There's all these giant cathedrals that are abandoned. But they're just, in terms of the design and architecture, they're just crushingly brilliant. And as you go in, they're designed such that they have these long, like these tall towers and like spires. And what it's supposed to do, and everything, like every roof is elevated. And what it's supposed to do is make you feel small. So I'm 6'3", and when I walked into that cathedral, I felt about this tall, like just a little guy. And so I'm looking up and I'm like, wow. Well then, after, by way of Vienna, we went to Budapest and we went to the synagogue. That was ginormous there. Like, the line was out the door to go check it out, but like even standing at the base of it, I did the same thing. I'm like a kid in a toy store. I was just, wow. My wife had to sorry. And there's this sense of grandioseness at what you're looking at, and it makes you feel really small. And that's kind of what the brilliant, beautiful, compelling, creative poetry of Eyka does. It's almost like you enter into it, and it's like this cathedral that lifts all the way up to draw your eyes up to the Lord and make you feel small. It's supposed to inspire this feeling of grandioseness, even in lament and exile, and again, make you feel as small as you might feel in exile, in lament, and in a difficult season. And so like a giant cathedral, like a giant synagogue, these poems hold up like trusts of this synagogue or this cathedral holds the structure up. And so I want you to remember that. I want you to think about this as we get into these 5 poems. And lastly, my last sales pitch for Eyka or Lamentations is this. Again, this is unreplicatable. If I were to assign, Bruce, if I were to assign you a project and I would say, okay, Bruce, here's the deal. I want you to tell me about the most difficult thing you've ever been through. Hold up. But you have to do it as poetry. You'd be like, ah. And then I'd be like, okay, but it has to have nice rhythm, meter, rhyme. It has to have wordplay in it too. And some of the words have to rhyme and to have wordplay. Or sometimes, like if you just reverse the first and last letter, that would be the wordplay. Hebrew poetry works like this. Oh, you need to make sure it has parallelism the entire way through. Well, hold on, I'm not done. You also have to write it as an acrostic. You have to start Aleph, then the second verse, Bet, and then Gimel, okay? No, I'm not done yet. You also have to make sure that it's biblically consistent and theologically profound. I'm not done yet. You also have to make consistent references back to the rest of the Tanakh and the Torah. I'm not done yet. You also have to make it creative and compelling and timeless. And lastly, it better make everyone cry. Okay, it better make everyone cry. You'd be like, oh my gosh, this seems impossible. Yeah, this is the brilliance and the genius of Eyka. This is why it's one of my favorite texts to preach on, even though I don't like serious stuff and I don't, personality-wise, love lament. But Eyka draws you into it like an austere cathedral or like this beautiful synagogue. And so let's direct our attention to poems 1 and 2. And if you have your Tanakh, if you have your scriptures with you, you can read with me Lamentations. I'm going to give you, this is the longest verse I'm going to read, so let's just get into it. Immerse ourselves in it. Lamentations, Echad, 1. How lonely sits the city, once so full of people, talking about Yerushalayim. She was once great among the nations, has become like a widow. The princes among the provinces has become the princess among the provinces has become a forced laborer. Ugh. Bitterly, she weeps in the night. Her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, there is no one to comfort her. All of her friends have betrayed her. They have become her enemies. Judah is gone into exile and under affliction and great servitude. She dwells among the nations. She finds no resting place. All her pursuers have overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to her Moadim. All her gates are desolate. Her Kohanim groan. Her maidens grieve. She is in bitter anguish by the river, crying into the river in Babylon. This is how Eyka picks up. It comes right out the gate. And let me show you a picture real quick of what poem 1 looks like. I want to show you this in the original Hebrew. This is the acrostic where you see circled there's Aleph, and that's the first verse, Beit, second verse, Gimel, third verse, Dalet, fourth verse. See how this is held together? Again, in the tragedy, there's this, in this chaos, there's this order. In this tragedy, there's this beauty, this poetic beauty. But you just heard what we read. It's bitter. And in this, I'm going to keep giving you some samples of each of these poems. And show of hands, who here has ever shopped at Costco and or Sam's Club? Okay, yeah, okay, so Costco and Sam's Club must be doing well, okay. You know, when you go around and have little samples for you to try, this is what we're going to do in Eyka and Lamentations with each poem, but pretend it's like maror, right? Like everything you get is just like bitter herbs, and you're like, I'm going to try the next one. Oh my God, what is that? It's taste expired. That's what we're going to do as we go through. And one of the things I want to point out that's very unique here is, before we get to our sample, if you will, from poem 2, there's this beautiful personification that takes place. This is also a tell of beautiful Hebrew poetry. And we see that in poems 1 and 2, because poems 1 and 2 are similarly structured, we hear references to like daughters of Zion and daughters of Jerusalem, or daughter of Zion and daughters of Jerusalem, or you'll read daughter of Judah. It's just a representative of those who are in exile. And so in this way, in case this historical group of people feels far off, picture like a specific person, like a daughter of Zion. I have a 4-year-old daughter, a daughter of Zion, a daughter of Jerusalem, crying, weeping by the river. Doesn't that draw you in a little bit more? When I think about my daughter Ruth, 4 years old, and she's crying by a river in exile, what that elicits emotionally, that's what we're supposed to feel. And so then, if we read poem 2, then we read this in 2:18. Their heart cried out to the Lord, O wall of the daughter of Zion. Let tears run down like a river, by the river, day and night. Give yourself no relief, your eyes no rest. And in this, we see this grieving. And what I can tell you is, with that picture of the cathedral or synagogue, you see, poems 1 and poems 2 are structured the exact same. They have that same aleph, bet, gimel, and you go on so and so. And they're similar in content as they just come out. Each one starts with the word Eyka, how? Poem 2 picks up, Eyka, how? Each talks about the daughters of Jerusalem, the daughters of Zion, and just weeping. And each of poems 1 and 2 recognize that Yisrael was in Ha'eretz, Israel was in the land, and they were actually, because of the Lord's justice, removed from the land, and they were having to endure the bitterness of exile, but they also cried out for the Lord to demonstrate justice and his kindness and his faithfulness to his covenant to bring them back into the land and ultimately bring about his good plans, purposes, and promises for his people, and ultimately for the restoration of his good creation. This is what they longed for, and this is what we read and we feel in poems 1 and 2. But then, let's look at the giant building again, this beautiful, austere building, and we see poem 3. And poem 3, if we're looking at a synagogue, it would almost be like one that raised up a little bit more and was more ornate and austere than all the other ones. Because in poem 3, we get a little bit of a switch up. We get a little bit of what we call okey doke switcheroo, as I like to say. And there's a change of pace. A third of it is lament, and then it's like 2/3 hope. It kind of breaks the meter and the pacing. And before we read one of the verses from it, I want to show you how the shift, oh my gosh, this is the genius of it. This is the tectonic layers of creativity. Not only will you just read and hear and feel the shift, you see it in the original Hebrew. So what happens is, remember how I went aleph, verse 2, bet, gimel, dalet? Now you see 3 in chapter 3. You see that each one, this is so much harder to do. Again, I've tried it. The acrostic starts with, you have to do 3 A's in a row, 3 B's in a row, 3 G's in a row, because that's what comes next in the Hebrew alphabet. And so it goes aleph, 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 bet, 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 gimel, gimel, gimel. This format switches and you go, ooh, something's different. Yeah, because poems 1 and 2 were structured and formatted a similar way, similar message, similar aesthetic. 3, you automatically look at it and you go, oh, something's different. It looks different. If you have a Hebrew Tanakh, it will look different structurally. So you go, okay, so how is this different? I'm feeling it. I'm seeing it. Okay, so what's the content? Hit me with the content. 3:21, let's read. This I recall to my heart. Literally in Hebrew it reads, this I return to in my heart. This I return to in my heart. Therefore I have hope. Because of the mercies of Adonai, we will not be consumed, for his compassions never fail. We sang that this Shabbat. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Adonai is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. And man, that hits different than poems 1 and 2. There's this fervor, there's this faith, there's a lifting of the eyes. And here's what's so incredible. In poem 3, as it's this tower of the synagogue that reaches up higher, it's that cathedral where I'm like, whoa, it reaches the highest and most beautiful and austere. We read about hope. But here's the thing. Before we talk about the bracket of hope, let me tell you the word for hope. The verb for to hope here is yachal. Yachal. There is a word for, the noun for hope is teva. It's not what's used here. It's yachal. And yachal means, check it out, to hope, looking forward. It's the exact same verb for to wait. Those two verbs are inseparable. So if you're like, wait, Matt, what verb would I use for wait? I bet yachal. Okay, what about, I'm done waiting and now I'm hoping. I'd be like, yachal. And then what about to hope? Yachal. What about like to wait? Yachal. It's the same word. And it's because the very nature of waiting and hoping is that they're irrevocably bound, inseparably bound. You wait and you hope for a future to be actualized. And as you hope for that future to be actualized, you have to wait. And you wait and you hope, and as you hope, you wait. Do you see it? And that's what we see in poem 3. But then there's like this gravitational center. There's this thing holding them down from drifting and spiraling off too much into lament in this very same passage we read. And if you focused on the word hope the first time I read it, I want to focus on a couple other words here. I'm going to read the same passage. This I recall to my heart, therefore I have hope. Because of the mercies of Adonai, we will not be consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And I'll read this last one. Adonai is my portion, says my soul, therefore I will hope in him. There are key words here where we see mercies, we see compassions, and we see faithfulness. And these three words they should like glow like blue hyperlinks you can click on, because these words are, I'll just give you the Hebrew for one of them. The one where you see compassions, you'll see in some translations it's steadfast love. It's the word chesed, which we also sang tonight. And anytime you see the word steadfast love or loving kindness or compassions, it's the word chesed. And if you click that, it'll take you back always to Exodus 34:6 in the Torah. And in the Torah, it's where we see this passage where I call it Adonai on the mic. It's when Adonai shares what he is like, his central character in nature. So it's like the Lord on the mic going, is this thing on? Is this thing on? Okay. The Lord, and so we'll read it together. Exodus 34:6. Check this out. Adonai passed before him and proclaimed, talking to Moshe, Adonai, Adonai, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness, that's chesed and truth. So central to the character and nature of the Lord is this chesed, this steadfast love for his people in making the covenant, his steadfast love for his people and providing them with atonement, his steadfast love for his people, even in exile and lament and grieving and mourning. This is the chesed of the Lord. And what's so beautiful is that in the same passage we read in Eyka, in poem number 3, not only is this reference to waiting and hoping, but in between, there's these three key adjectives that are the most consistent adjectives to describe the Lord throughout Scripture. Mercy, chesed, compassion and loving kindness, and faithfulness. Mercy, chesed, and faithfulness. And so even in their waiting and hoping, what keeps them grounded, what keeps them sure, the sure footing, is the character and nature of the Lord. His mercy, his chesed, and his faithfulness. That helps them wait in the weight of waiting as they hope in what the Lord might bring about. And so poem 3, man, oh man, if you're into movies, man, it starts to swell. The strings start to swell. The timpani starts to boom, 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 boom. The choir is, oh, and you think you're like, oh, Eyka's going to end here, right? It's going to end big. The steadfast love of the Lord. Yes, we believe. We're going to hope. We're going to wait and hope. And all of a sudden, we hit poem 4, and we get the okie doke switcheroo again. It kind of, if you ever played basketball, it crosses you over, it breaks your ankles, and you go, wait, what? Because in poem 4, we'll show it up here on this like giant synagogue we're looking at. Poem 4, you see how part of it's kind of falling apart? Well, that's because poem 4 structurally goes right back to where poems 1 and 2 were. It starts, so poem 1 started with Eyka, how? Poem 2 started with Eyka, how? Poem 3, yes, wait and hope, and the steadfast love of the Lord, the chesed of the Lord. Poem 4 goes, Eyka, how? And when you read it, you go, oh, we're right back, aren't we? And we are. And in fact, structurally, we have a picture. It goes right back to the same acrostic format and structure as poems 1 and 2, which again, in tectonic layers of communication and creativity, take us right back into lament and mourning. How? And asking the hard questions. This is the genius of Eyka, of Lamentations. And so in this, let me just give you that sample, that Costco Sam's Club sample that is bitter to taste in 4:17 and 18. And then we'll get to poem 5 and we'll bring it home. 4:17 and 18. Even now our eyes waste away, looking in vain to our help. From our towers we watched for a nation that could not save us. They hunted our steps, so we could not walk in our streets. Our end was near, our days are numbered, for our end had come. Just remembering we were in Yerushalayim and we were plucked from Yerushalayim. And now here we are by the river, crying. We're right back, man. It's feeling good there. Poem 3. Right back. And that takes us to poem 5. And let me show you this about poem 5. Let's put this grandiose synagogue up there. Poem 5, look at the structure. It looks like I built that part of the synagogue. It didn't hold up. It spirals down, and in poem 5, the wheels come off. The thing about what I was saying about borrowing my wife's car, the door's missing. It's scratched. Man, like the windshield's cracked like a giant bird hit it or something. And it spirals into despair. And in fact, even the format of it, which I can show you in the original Hebrew, if you look at the acrostic structure, it breaks. So if you're not familiar, it starts with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it goes completely out of order. It is completely out of order. Remember how I told you about that really clean acrostic? Aleph, Beit, Gimel. Okay, and then it got more complex. Aleph, 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 Beit, Beit, Beit. Okay, now I went right back to Aleph, Beit, Gimel. Now, no structure, none. The acrostic is broken. The lamenter is broken. There is now only disorder and chaos. There is now only lament as poem 5 spirals into, and it's almost like this beautiful austere cathedral, this grandiose synagogue just kind of spirals out. And in 5:1 we read, remember, Adonai, what has come upon us. Look and see our disgrace. And sometimes lament works like that. Sometimes you just kind of keep coming back to it. And what's so beautifully compelling about Eyka, about Lamentations, is that there's no resolution and there's no resolve. It just kind of leaves you there. And I can tell you at the end of verse 5, there's just this plea to the Lord, like, please help us, please remember us, please deliver us. So again, they're in exile. Please help us, please save us, please deliver us. And as like the music is like spiraling down, dun, 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 like just fade to black, and that's the end of the movie. And this one biblical scholar I love, he said, Eyka, or Lamentations, as they're crying into the river, it reads like an incomplete book of Job. And you don't get the resolve because you have to sit in lament. And I tell people all the time, it reminds me of like, if you've ever been to like an art gallery exhibit, it's like looking at like a painting from like this French artist, and then he's like painting this beautiful landscape, and then all of a sudden it just like turns into like a crayon and then nothing. And the artist was like, I did this because it is creative. I needed to leave you in the tension of the thing. And you're like, that's weird, dude, but okay. But I get it. It makes me wanting more. It leaves me wanting more. And that's the cliffhanger. And that's what we see in Eyka, what we see in Lamentations, is that lament is part of life, informative for our faith. There's literally an entire book written on it and devoted to it. And it's all about waiting and hoping and lament in the meantime, but staying grounded on the central character and nature of the Lord as merciful and full of chesed and faithfulness. But we have to keep the rest of the Tanakh in mind. Because while there is an unresolved ending, if you are in the Tanakh and if you're in the Ketuvim, what comes next is a scroll of Esther and Daniel. And what you see in both texts is the Lord being faithful to his people in this window into exile. And you see them go from the bottom to the top of the empire. You see the name of the Lord actually, ironically, held up before the nations. You see the Lord bless his people and eventually return his people into the land. you see this beautiful faithfulness that the Lord preserves his people to bring about his good plans, purposes, and promises, to connect back to Genesis 12, to bless them, to bless all peoples of the earth, to be a part of the restoration ultimately of his good creation. You see this deliverance that takes place. And ultimately we'll see that the line of Yeshua runs through this people who will return to their land where Jesus will be incarnate, where Yeshua will be incarnate and Yeshua will be born. We see the Lord's mercy and chesed and faithfulness even in lament and even in mourning. And here's the thing, you have to go through lament to get to deliverance. And ultimately we know that so let's talk about the deliverance and victory of Yeshua. We know that Yeshua fulfilled all the hopes of the Tanakh, all the hopes of these people and of all humanity. We see that Yeshua brought about the ultimate deliverance from sin and death and wickedness and being turned in on ourselves and lost, to ultimately having new life and being new creation in Messiah Yeshua, to faithfully follow him here and now and into eternity, the way everlasting as it's described in the Brit Hadashah. And so between now and then, man, let us root ourselves in the word. Let us know that it is okay to lament. You have to lament before you get to deliverance. And let's realize how the Lord has been merciful and demonstrated chesed and faithfulness to his people in order to bring about this deliverance and this victory of Yeshua. And this is the victory that we can ultimately wait for, hope for, but also live in now, realizing, as Rabbi Shaul says in Romans, and let this be a good word to you, in Romans 8:28, Rabbi Shaul says, in the meantime, in between time, before Yeshua returns again, be encouraged by this. Now we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purposes. Let that encourage your soul. And ultimately, history is his story. And while we might not know what history holds, we know who holds history. And we can rest in that and be encouraged in that even in seasons of lament. And so let's end tonight by just reaffirming that lament is part of life, informative for our faith. And we're always in some stage of waiting, hoping, and as there's a discrepancy between this and that, it's okay to lament. I tell people all the time, if you want to memorize a scripture in Luke, here's the verse for you. Ready for this? Yeshua wept. Mic drop. I know my scriptures, do you? Yeshua wept. Got it memorized. But because Yeshua wept, you can too. It's okay. I tell people often, it's okay to not be okay. And while I'm a guilty offender of not living that sometimes, it's okay to not be okay. In fact, it's healthy and cathartic to lament. Kneeling by the river, letting the river of tears running down our cheek fill the river running next to us. That's healthy. It's good. It's right. Any psychologist would tell you that, because science and psychology is always trying to catch up to the scriptures. And I had this experience one time, before we get kind of to the ending here. I had this experience one time in pastoral ministry where I was talking to this woman, and she was wrestling with infertility. And it had been a long time, and she just was lamenting and grieving and mourning, and it was devastating her. Every month she'd get her hopes up, and they were dashed. And she wanted to meet with me, and she said, Pastor Matt, I feel bad for saying this, but I don't really like coming to church anymore. And so I said, well, why is that? And she said, because I'm not happy. I'm not joyful. I'm asking questions. I feel off. I feel out of sorts. I feel like I have questions for the Lord. And I feel like everyone else surrounding me when we gather for service is just like, and by the way, I love that you guys are more that way than the church I work at. So I mess with you guys. Yeah. But she sees that and she's like, I'm not feeling that. This feels weird. This feels really inconsistent. Or it's like the person that's clapping and they look like they're having a good time, but they have a mean mug the whole time. She felt like that. And she felt discordant in that and inconsistent. And I said, my sister, you're just in lament. And she's like, what? And I was like, lament. And I said, there's a whole scroll of the scriptures committed to this called Eyka, or Lamentations. It is okay to lament. It is okay to cry out. How? How is this happening? Wait, why? What is it? And do you know that the verb yachal for waiting and Eyka, this question of how, it is most prolifically found, here in Eyka, but also in the Psalms, particularly the Psalms of Lament. And so I told her, I said, my sister, it is okay to not feel okay when you come to worship. That is okay. The Lord can handle your questions. The Lord can handle your dissonance. And you know what? As you wait and hope, here's the deal. You can be grounded in the steadfast love of the Lord, in his hesed. So just keep pulling up and be in a season of lament. That is okay. And it is healthy. And in fact, we know from scriptures that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. And so if that's you this Erev Shabbat, know that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. He is near to you in your lament. Lament is part of life, and it's formative for our faith. And so much of life is waiting and hoping and lament in the gap between. So I just want to encourage you, Congregation Beth Hallel, as you are mishpacha to me, and I felt led to give this sermon. And directly, I just want to say, whatever your season of lament is, maybe you're lamenting the state of your family. Maybe you're lamenting the state of your health. Maybe you're lamenting your work and your job, and you're like, do I have to go back next week? Maybe you're lamenting the state of the world, or you're seeing things on your news feed or on TV, and you're lamenting that. That is okay. That is healthy. And look around the room right now. One of the things you can take comfort and solace in is that you are not alone. This is why we gather together on Shabbat, to mourn together, to grieve together. There is a rich history, literature, and liturgy in doing this. And so it's okay to lament, but also it's okay to be encouraged. And know that the Lord... You know what's changed from Eyka and Lamentations to now about the Lord? Nothing. Nothing has changed. Still merciful, still full of chesed, and still faithful. Do you know what's changed about Yeshua? Nothing. And so we still trust and rest in Yeshua's deliverance and victory. And that lifts our eyes and our hearts. And it did when Rabbi Shaul said this. And I want to end with this Erev Shabbat to be an encouragement to you. In 2 Corinthians, Rabbi Shaul says this: Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Yeshua the Messiah, the Father of compassion, that's chesed, and God of all encouragement. He encourages us in every trouble so that we may be able to encourage those who are in any trouble, through the very encouragement with which we ourselves are encouraged by God. For just as the suffering of Messiah overflows into us, so also through Messiah our encouragement overflows. So no matter what you're going through, know it is okay to lament. Know that you are not alone in doing so, but also know that you can receive encouragement, and that as you wait, you can hope. And in the meantime, in between time, rest and be grounded in the mercy and the chesed and faithfulness of the Lord as we await the second coming of Yeshua and the ultimate deliverance and ultimately the ultimate victory that will bring about in spite of and at the culmination of our laments. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you, and we thank you so much for your goodness. We thank you for your mercy and your chesed and your faithfulness. And Lord, I pray comfort to anyone listening online, in this room, after the fact. I pray comfort. Spirit, may you comfort. Comfort your people. And for families grieving and those lamenting, I pray comfort. I pray encouragement. And I pray for that overwhelming and abundant sense of hope. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.